You are an engineer. You thrive in project-based work. As a matter of fact, you've probably been involved in program leadership. You're thinking that you want to take your giving back to another level. You want to get involved in mission-driven work. You're excited and you're ready to go. Full time and full throttle into the work. However, you discover you are met with a little bit of resistance. And you're trying to figure out how can you get into the work that you've always wanted to do. Hi, my name is Alicia AMMorgan. I am an engineer who has worked in both the for-profit sector and nonprofit sector and learned how to thrive in mission-driven work. Today, I'm going to give you some insight on just the way that you can do the same. Now let's talk about the pathways. There are many pathways that people get involved in mission-driven work or make transition into various different sectors. They can have the pathway of an associate degree or a trade school. They can have a four-year degree or an advanced degree. They can do it through their experience and their certifications. And all this matters because when you get into the culture and the environment, you want to understand how your pathway works, as well as try to understand the pathway of others. This is all that you need to do to begin the journey as you go on the winding road to mission-driven work. I want to give you a little bit more about my background. I am an aerospace and industrial engineer. I've worked in aviation and defense. I've also worked in the nonprofit sector. I upskilled through nonprofit management certification, worked in after-school programs, became an executive leader as vice president of education and programs at an aviation museum, done some college and workforce readiness initiatives. It's a mouthful, I know. And also have done some project management consulting. I am PMP certified and Agile metric certified. That certification works well because if you're going to market with different products and services, you need to understand what to measure and how to define success for what you're doing. Now, as we talk about pathways, then we have to figure out what kind of mission-driven work that we actually want to do. This Venn diagram shows you many ways. So you have the private sector. The private sector could be involved in doing some mission-driven work. You have the third sector with nonprofit sector. You have museums, you have community organizations, you have all these social programs and services, and then you're meeting a social need that overlaps, whether it be education, you're providing a public service or et cetera, and then public sector, research, healthcare, all those things that are some heritage involved in. So as you think about your pathway, then you have to think about, okay, what industry I'm going in and what is that special need that I'm going to meet as I do this mission-driven work. So let's go to the next phase. Now you need a mission statement. Just as mission-driven work has a mission statement, you need to have your own mission statement. So that can be something that you can always go back to and say, oh, am I in alignment with my mission statement in the work that I'm doing in mission-driven work? So start with you. Again, we start with that pathway, who you are, what you've done, then your skills and your abilities, your personality traits. Engineers are very analytical, so you have to be analytical and open-minded enough to understand what human needs are. There's still a human behind the need. And then your values, your dreams and passions. And then you're coming up with your powerful mission statement. Next, I will give you some insight onto a mission statement about myself. It's always up for refinement as I'm going in my journey and learning new things about myself. So this photograph was taken last year at the Society of Women Engineers conference. And the conference theme was living without limits. As we think about mission-driven work, we think about going beyond and serving a greater purpose. You think about doing it globally, and there's always teams behind it. As we think about mission-driven work, it's always people over processes and tools, as we learned in Agile leadership, if you're familiar with that, or adaptive leadership. And there is a range. I started off talking about pathways. That book, Range, talks about different pathways that people go into work. and understanding how someone can be a generalist and done different things, and just understanding how all those pathways help things to be successful. So we have to think about the range of the team as well as your range in your career portfolio. And the Culture Map is a great book to understand how miscommunication can happen. People have direct versus indirect communication. And when you're thinking about mission-driven work, it's at the heart of someone's needs. And sometimes it's not always easy to directly say that. And so really understand that you have a strategy, your communication style, but you want to be focused on people. My mission statement talks about transformation through educational opportunities globally, empowering communities through innovation capital. So as you think about your journey, you're going to need innovation capital, and that is the resources you need to be successful. You're going to need to pull different funding. You need to work with different communities, collaborate with different organizations. So you want to be known as that person who can do that and integrate technology. Technology is in everything that we do. So that STEM, whether you're at a STEM mission-driven work or not, you're going to need technology. So those things. And as always, I am an engineer, as I talked about. I've worked in nonprofit leadership, and I know how to connect different people to do impactful work. And so that is what I want to continue to do through whatever product and service that I'm working on. And remember, this mission statement is always revised, being revisited and revised based on what your aspirations continue to be. Now, transitioning to mission-driven work, you have to understand the language. So I'm involved in education with my mission-driven work. So that's pedagogy, that's curriculum, that's assessments, understanding how the STEM education aligns with Texas state standards, because I am in Texas or wherever you are, the national standards in education, and really understanding how to volunteer strategically. I want to emphasize that because you can't volunteer for everything. You're going to get burned out. And remember, when we talked about our mission statement, our pathway, the sector that we want to be involved in, and the social need we want to meet, we can make sure that we're volunteering in alignment with all those things. You hear that? Alignment. Now, as you work in your organizations, there may be community initiatives that you can be involved with in mission-driven work. If your organization does some community work, you can get involved in that. I've done that with a lot of STEM education initiatives while I was still in corporate, going to work with schools. So that gave me a background on how it is to go into schools and start initiatives. And then I worked with dynamic people across many generations and backgrounds. So I stayed connected with a lot of my coworkers. So I've made this decision that I'm transitioning out of traditional engineering and I really want to do more mission-driven work. And I let people know that. One of my former coworkers reached out to me and said, hey, I've been invited to this high school. They're starting a board and the organization is called NAF. I don't know much about it. Won't you come and join me? I go in, and the NAF is National Academy Foundation, and the premise is to get students future ready in a career pathway. You see how pathways keep coming up. And the particular pathway of this high school was engineering and health sciences. And so they were in their inaugural year of the planning to become a NAFTRAC certified school in engineering and health sciences. So these students, these high school students, will be prepared to go to college with some course credit alignment, in alignment with that. I walk in, it's the inaugural year of the planning. They're just starting out in year one, and they're looking for a board chair. Now, I was this organization here at the bottom, Training for Excellence. We plan conferences for teens, and we had particular topics that they were involved in or what was emerging or really important to them. And we were in the background helping them to plan from start to finish an annual conference for them to really share what's going on with them. And this particular conference, we're talking about stereotypes and how foreshadowing is this. As I was thinking about going to different pathways, you walk in and people have a preconceived notion of what the ideal person may be. Remember, we're talking about range, and you really have to be able to move beyond that and not label people as one thing, as my career has been expansive. So as a result of doing that, it's my first board experience. I was the fundraising chair. I was responsible for organizing the timeline, getting some speakers involved, doing some workshop and facilitating myself, and then going out to get partnerships with organizations for some of the needs for the conference, some giveaways, or we needed some food or whatever resources we need. So that was the start of me doing that. So I was a part of the board. I wasn't the chair then. Now this NAF Academy comes along and I decide to volunteer to be a chair. And I had a mentor to help me along that journey. And so the chair was responsible for, again, getting those partnerships, getting some in-kind donations for the school, planning the annual career conference. So you see that volunteering strategically helped me take it to the next level as a board chair, advisory board chair. And then from there, actually getting involved in what the students were going to visit some organizations that align with STEM. And then the rising seniors, once the student gets in year 3, going to senior year, they get internships at organizations. I was the board chair for about 2 years. And then I went off and I became the vice president of education and programs. I continued my relationship with that particular high school and NAF academies in general by allowing the students to come to the museum to get some education programming aligned with STEM or whatever their career pathway was, because we had a lot of dynamic speakers coming in and organizations, and then hosting interns. So I was involved in that. So as the students becoming rising seniors, interns there, and then finding internships elsewhere and funding the interns because they were paid internships or finding funding from them. So those were things. So I was constantly building upon my experiences in mission-driven work to go to the next level from project to program leadership, as you can see. And all that starts with volunteering strategically and also getting some upskilling. So I do have the nonprofit management certification. So you really have to understand the language and all the key stakeholders that you need to get involved with, and they have to know, like, and trust you. And that is very important as you transition into mission-driven work. And as engineers, we want to analyze how you come up with our perfect plan, but that is really the heart of it. It's getting to know the people and what their needs are. The building blocks of success. There's a lot that you need to keep going forward. You need human capital, of course, engineering skills, all the other skills. You need social capital, networks and connections. All those things happen to be successful as advisory board chair because of the relationships that I form. And then building from each place, different networks that you need. And really understanding that it's not always the strong ties, the people that you know the longest, that will help you get to another level because they may not have the experience or expertise. So you have to get comfortable in talking to the strangers and always treating everyone as if they're a decision maker, because you truly don't always know who is connected to who or who can help you expand your impact in your mission-driven work. And your reputation. As you do that, you build more trust and capabilities and credibility, and then you amplify the tools and strategies that you need to enhance your visibility and impact. These photographs here, that's Project Management Institute. So as I had been involved in leading projects and programs over the years, about 2 years ago, because my career spans over 15 years, I decided to become PMP certified. And that's when last year, I also got my Agile Metrics certification. So that's continuous learning and improvement, and mission-driven work is necessary. And then every now and then I'll get to speak in front of an audience about my mission-driven work. So that's all that matters in that capacity. And then we talk about communication and storytelling. It's very important that we learn that people communicate very differently. And you have to really move away from just that technical engineering, just the data, to add the human elements. So what happened, what the pain points are, and what are the people gaining from this mission-driven work that you provide. Always keeping that in the top of the mind, always getting surveys. As you capture those lessons learned in surveys, what are you doing about it? Staying connected to your mission statement and your why, and making sure that all your strategic actions are aligned with your mission statement. It's all about alignment and keeping that in mind as you work in mission-driven work and understanding who you are, because you can always go back to that if you find yourself veering off. You're like, wait, this is not exactly my mission. And always strengthening those power skills that you need: effective communication, creative problem solving, adaptive leadership. And as you establish yourself as a thought leader, these headlines are very vital for me as getting visibility in media. So the first one, I was honored by Dallas Business Journal a few years ago for the Women in Technology Awards. Remember, I said that my goal as part of my mission statement is expanding through technology and education. So I was nominated and I was awarded as a Women in Technology Awards advocate. And the headline talks about that at that museum, there's a flight museum, and how I use my engineering skills to educate over 42,000 students. Now, it is also credited to the team and the partnerships that we had. We started off serving a little over 30,000 students when I got there, and then over 42,000 in less than 2 years. How does that happen? Remember, I said I was on a NAF Academy board at high school. A lot of the partnerships that we needed were with Dallas Independent School District schools and other schools around the Metroplex, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So the relationships that I formed made that a lot easier. So some of the stakeholders that I needed to speak to, I knew that. And then I was engaged with a key connector in the school district and who also had a pathway of engineering or STEM and then venturing off into education. So we had that connection, that common ground, someone who had that pathway who really empowered me to really be successful in my role when I transitioned to executive and program leadership from project management. Because I worked with her in getting those NAF Academy, that school certified ultimately. And we had the first level graduates who've gone on to study engineering and also getting them internships at the museum. You see, continuing that relationship, that social capital, building innovation capital, and having a reputation as someone who gets things done. The second headline is about Dallas Morning News. I was featured in the art and culture section, and it was about working with the National Society Engineers and Black engineers in Dallas and the connection to the movie Hidden Figures. When the movie came out, I was so excited to hear about these Black women who were involved in getting the space race or getting us to space and having this heavily involved in the mathematical equations and really getting that off. And so I would really identify with Mary Jackson in the movie, who had an aerospace background, who also did a lot of community outreach and education and started mentoring. So we had that similar pathway. And I decided to tell a personal story. I had no idea what would happen next. So I shared that story on LinkedIn and then shared it on Twitter. It just so happened that I used a hashtag and a journalist from Dallas Morning News found it and did a feature story on me. Now, the interesting thing about that as well is that feature story, the photograph is taken at that high school where I was the advisory board chairperson. So it all lends itself and connected and to tell a story of my thought leadership in STEM education and then creating these pathways for people to be empowered to success. So you see that it's all about those building blocks. We're starting with knowing our pathway, right? Then figuring out what sector that we want to be involved in and what kind of social need that we're going to meet and help to meet or empower people with through our mission-driven work, and finding all the capital that we need and really moving forward in a way that empowers people and thinking about people first. Now, going even a step further and talking about empathy and innovation, you're always a student and teacher. So don't take that for granted. You're always learning. You are a thought leader, but you're also learning too in mission-driven work. It's continuous learning, continuous improvement, because innovation happens when everybody is involved to really figure it out. Because empathy is about what people think, feel, hear, and see. And you don't always know everything. You have to get that feedback from other people to understand what all of that means. And then your reputation will follow you. If you're a person that's that, I'm an engineer, I know how to problem solve, I know how to connect the dots, and without getting all the pieces, you won't go very far for a long time. This diagram is a great diagram to talk about how we have to go beyond compassion. Compassion goes beyond that sympathy and empathy. And going beyond compassion means to keep going and really learning how to be more compassionate all the time. And we think about this other people's experiences. This is from Harvard Business Review. It's from the Potential Project as a source. we can think about mission-driven work. Sometimes we see infomercials or videos and it's pulling at your heartstrings and it's telling a sad story and you feel sorry for the person. You want to give money or give something to this. And then you may say, I feel for you. Oh, what happened to you? And you have to be careful about our language. Remember, we talked about communication. So there's a lot of things I learned in mission-driven work that we have to be careful about in language, saying at risk versus under-resourced or underrepresented, and just understanding that someone is in dire straits versus in need, understanding that someone with a disability has accessibility needs to be taken in consideration. So just thinking about someone living with a disability versus saying they're disabled, really understanding the language that you're using. So getting beyond that, I just feel sorry for you. I feel for you. And then you get to empathy, what they think, feel, hear, their pain points, what they're gaining from this mission-driven work that you're providing. So I feel with you. And then getting to the point, I'm here to help. One of the things that I've always heard about working in nonprofits and mission-driven work is the ultimate goal is whoever you're serving, your client, you want to get them to the point of they're empowered, which means they no longer need your service. A true outcome of mission-driven work is transformation. Someone starts one place and their lives are forever transformed by the product or service that you provide, which means eventually they no longer need it. And so that's kind of hard for some people to grasp, but that's really what it's about, that compassion. You're here to help and empower. This is a tough one. You have to think about ethical decision-making. It plays a crucial role in mission-driven work. There's ethical dilemmas. There may be two things or more things that are right, but is it the right thing to do to move forward? You have to make the right decision based on what your mission statement is, based on what the board and the strategic direction of the organization. You have compliance to deal with and all that, because your work and your outputs are measured by various organizations to give you as a quality organization. When I was involved in leading education programs at the museum, I was really telling our team, let's get our data audited to make sure it's correct. So our data got audited and we became recognized for our data. We got certified by the Texas Education Agency as an organization that provide great outcomes and measures. We became a mentor, award-winning mentoring organization. So for me, getting those amplifiers for the organization while I was there and then reaching over those 42,000 students from where we started, getting more grant funding in, all those things were important to show that we were doing the right thing and we had outside organizations verifying our credibility. So that all those things are important. So always think about right versus what's the right thing to do based on what our strategic goals and objectives are in alignment with our mission statement. So again, when you think about yourself and your integrity and what you want to do, make sure your work is aligned with your mission statement. So that alignment, again, we're talking about that and that pathways in. Now, project to program management is still a really good topic to talk about. You can transition. So this is a measuring stick to figure out where you are. Remember your pathway. There may not be a definite start and end date to a project like you're used to. Engineers love that. Oh, this timeline. Things shift. Sometimes funding, budgets can be cut in funding. You don't get the grants that you think, or you have to shift your organizations and what you do. You provide some free services, then you also have to have a hybrid of services, funding coming in from outside sources beyond just grants. And so you have to be very adaptive in with that feedback that you're giving. I was leading programs and one of our customer schools was going to drop off. And we have to go in and get feedback that our program was no longer in alignment with what they need. So we had to make adjustments to that. So again, that feedback is always important, but it's still in alignment with our mission. So you can leverage those project management skills to get into program management. But these are things that you should think about. So to recap and call to action for you, remember, determine your pathway, what that background is. Remember, it could be associate's degrees, trade schools, certifications, experiences, 4-year degrees, advanced degrees, whatever it is. understand your pathway into the mission-driven work, and then the pathway of others that you'll be working with. And then your mission statement. So the mission statement of organization, and in your mission statement, where there's alignment, where you're what need that you want to meet through your social impact work, your mission-driven work. And then those building blocks, remember all that capital that you need beyond just your human capital skills, right? The social capital, the reputation, the amplifiers of your credibility, the innovation, the pulling in the resources that you need, and also embracing that empathy, right? Empathy and compassion, so that first you have to start with what people think, feel, hear, and see to get to the helping part of compassion. So just remember that. And then those ethical dilemmas, remember, you have to adhere to compliance for the organization to stay viable as a nonprofit, because you can get audited, and you want to make sure that you have been doing the right things for a long time. Now, this has been a topic that told you a lot about how engineers can thrive in mission-driven work. You can insert whatever your background is about thriving into mission-driven work. So if you're a healthcare person, you're a finance person, you are a program person, a project person, as I talked about, you are in faith-based organizations, so how you can thrive in mission-driven work. This presentation gives you some insight. If you have been thriving in mission-driven work for a long time, I love to hear a comment on what that looks like for you, so we can empower each other further. If you know someone that this presentation would be helpful to, please send that information to them. And remember, mission-driven work is about finding your pathway with actual industry you want to go into and what need you want to meet in that work. And also, don't forget about the ethical dilemmas. There may be multiple things that are right, but what is the right thing to do based on your mission and all the things that you have to comply with to continue to do that mission-driven work successful?